If there is one type of sales system I love creating, it is a webinar-based sales funnel. Webinars are such a great tool for connecting and engaging with your audience. And if you're a natural teacher, it's a great way to build a rapport with that audience as well. Your customer gets to hear your voice, see you talk in a way that makes them feel like they really know you. A lot better than, say, reading a PDF or an email. Not to say that those aren't important as well, but webinar sales system, there's something really, really special about it. And for the right offer, it's definitely worth the effort. So putting them together, that is the other part of the issue. That's a whole other beast. So luckily in this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire process for putting together a high converting webinar from start to finish. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Haley Dale, and I am a content and a sales funnel strategist helping you create more productive, purposeful, and yes, profitable content. So if that sounds like something that's right up your alley, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below this video for more value-packed videos just like this one every single Monday. Like I mentioned in the intro, webinars are such a great way of connecting and engaging with your audience, but I think it's also one of the best sales mechanisms as well. It's a great way to get people to slow down long enough to hear your message, to truly connect with them, to truly teach them something in a way that I think is going to be truly transformational. And this comes down to the principle of attention economics. So there are so many things vying for attention that sometimes it can be the most powerful thing that we can do as marketers is to provide so much value in a way that is like condensed and it's nice and contained. And one of those ways is a webinar where people are actually sitting down and giving us their undivided attention or paying attention to us. So in that way, we're going to be able to connect a lot more strongly than say something like a blog post. Or it's not to say that those things aren't powerful, but a webinar is incredibly powerful for that attention economics reason. So I think that webinars are best for people who really know their audience well. So it's a lot of work to put together. I'm going to walk you through 7 entire steps that you need to do to put together your webinar. And I have a webinar kit down below this video, so you can go and download that and play along with me. But I think it's really best for people who know their audiences really well. So it's not something that I would recommend for beginner entrepreneurs, because you just need to get to know your audience a bit more before you undertake a project like this. Otherwise, you might end up wasting a lot of time. Not to say that you can't use that eventually again in the future. So it's not a total waste of time, but just in general, I think I would recommend it for business owners who are a bit further along and know their audiences really well. In terms of what offers it is best for, I think it's best for anything above that kind of $500 price point. A variation for this is actually a micro webinar. So you also want to make sure that you're tailoring your webinar. I'm not going to talk about micro webinars here, but I want to tell you a little bit about them. So if you have, say, a service or a high-level mastermind and you're selling it to 6-figure plus entrepreneurs, they are incredibly busy and they are past that point in their business where they are watching a ton of 60-minute, 90-minute webinars. And so one of the variations of this is a micro webinar. So something that is 15 to 20 minutes, extremely value packed. Make sure that you're coming in at their level, at the level of the entrepreneur you want to be talking with, giving them something they haven't heard a million times before. And that can be a really great way of selling a really high ticket item, or getting them on a consult call where you can talk to them about your mastermind program or your one-on-one service. So the variation of this webinar is the micro webinar. We're not going to talk about it here, but it's important to know that this is another type that you can use for your business as well. So let's get started with the steps. So step number 1 of your webinar, I think, is to select your topic. So we want to make sure that you have a really great topic that you're excited about. So I like to start here by brainstorming different topics. And I think that we want to reverse engineer from your offer. So we want to think about, because we know that at the end we're going to be selling your offer. So we want to reverse engineer a topic that is going to be a great lead-in for your offer. So when it comes time to coming up with your topic for your webinar, I like to start with just a giant brainstorm. So I want you to start by coming up with as many topics as possible, and there are no bad ideas at this phase. So just come up with as many ideas as you can think of, and once you have that list of topics, our second step is to explore the options on your brainstorming list and select the one that you want to move forward with. So I think that you can use the following questions to evaluate your topic idea. So number 1, what is the purpose of this webinar? So this can be like coming up with the answers to that question will help you identify the options on that list, which maybe you can cross out right away. So maybe they don't align right there. Then second, those who watch the webinar, what will it help them do or discover about themselves? So with each of the topics that are left on your list, what is the purpose of that webinar? If you were to go with that topic, what would your viewer walk away with? What would they accomplish? So we want to make sure that we are creating something that's going to be a good fit for your offer. So you're going to, again, be able to cross some items off your list. So this is a whittling down, this is a narrowing in approach. Second thing is, once they're finished with the webinar, what are they going to walk away with? So we want to make sure that they are walking away with something. So I'm a big fan of like roadmap or blueprint or plan webinars where they walk away with a marketing plan, or they walk away with a sales funnel action plan, or they walk away with something they can actually use in their business, so that 60 minutes spent with me is time well spent, because they've also done some work and got something done for their business as well. So then how does the webinar relate to the offer that you want to sell? So we want to make then our final question. You should have a few options left on there. We want to pick the one that relates the best. One of the ways you can do this is think about the different lead-ins for your offer. So if you were selling, like I'll use an example here. So I sell a program called Your Content, Your Empire. It's basically, I teach you everything I know, sales funnel and content strategy to support that sales funnel course. And there are a couple of different options, a couple of different themes related to that offer. So I could reverse engineer some themes. So I teach sales funnels in there. I teach Pinterest. I teach traffic strategies. I teach systems and workflows to make sure that you can stay consistent. So I can choose any of those angles and it's going to relate to the offer. So another way you can think about this is, what are the themes for my offer and where can I reverse engineer some potential topics there? So then we hopefully have, and if from there, like if you've gone through that whittling down process and you still have a number of items or a couple of different items that you're having trouble choosing between, I think you could go into a Facebook group or go into a trusted group that you're a part of and just ask a question. I would say something like, I'm thinking about teaching a webinar on the general topic. These are some of the options I'm thinking about. Then list your options. What do you think would be most helpful for you? So that way we're creating constraints around it, but you're getting some external feedback on that if you're really having trouble making a decision. So step number 3 of this, like choose your topic process, is to name your webinar. So once you have your final option and you know your general topic, what we want to do is we actually want to name your webinar. So you've got to come up with a really catchy name that is going to make it worth people slowing down and watching and signing up and coming to your webinar. So I have a couple of different formulas that I recommend for your webinar. So the first one is what I call the objection buster. So we want to combine the biggest benefit of your webinar minus the biggest objection. For example, I have a webinar called How to Use Cash Injections to Make 10K. Even if you have a tiny email list. So I take the biggest benefit, how to use cash injections to make 10K, minus the biggest objection, the biggest thing that they think it won't work for them, but I have a tiny list. And so that way I've used that objection buster to come up with that topic. So then you can also use the numbered approach. So numbers are very effective in marketing. They make us pay attention. So if you have a certain number of steps that you're going to bring people through in your webinar, this approach could help. So 6 steps to a high converting webinar, a little meta there, or 5 secrets to find your soulmate. So coming up with that numbered approach where it's also going to create a structure for your webinar too. So those are 2 of the go-tos when I'm coming with naming a webinar that I like to go to. So the second phase of your webinar funnel is to create your webinar briefing. And if you're familiar with me at all, you know I love an offer docket, a webinar docket, a briefing. So in this phase, you're going to ask yourself a couple of questions, and I recommend opening up a Google Doc so you already have your topic. And then I want you to ask yourself these questions. So number 1, if you were describing the webinar to a friend, what would you tell them about it? Number 2, what does this webinar do? So what are people going to get? Who does this webinar help? So who should actually attend the webinar? So we want to get really specific with that. What is it and how does it work? So how does the process that you're going to be teaching in the webinar, how does it actually work? So what is the process that you're teaching in the webinar? Second thing is, what are 3 problems that this webinar solves? We want to get really specific and have at least 3. What are the 3 main problems that this webinar solves? Does it help me make 10K? Does it help me build my list at the same time? So think about those things. What are the problems that it solves? It's going to be really helpful in your marketing language later on as well. And then what are 4 things that you're going to be teaching in this webinar? So why does each of those things that you're teaching matter to your target audience? So we're getting creative here with what you're going to be teaching. So the different things, the different what's, right? The different steps you're going to be going through, and why are each of those steps important, or why are each one of those tips or things that you're teaching, why are they important? So step number 2 of your webinar briefing is to decide if you're going to use a hook to the end bonus. So a hook to the end bonus, I use these in webinars quite frequently. So it's basically like a really, really great bonus, a great PDF resource usually that people get if they stay till the very end of the webinar. So this can be a great way to entice people to stay through long enough, give them a little extra motivation. So you can come up with a free gift that relates but doesn't take away from your paid offer, but is still a really enticing offer to get them, like, to motivate them to actually stay. Step 3 of our webinar briefing is to outline your main points. So we want to just, like, even if they're not perfect, even if they're not final at this phase, we want to know what those main points are going to be. So just come up with that list of, like, if you were creating a skeleton outline of your webinar, what are like your main headlines? What are the main points that you're teaching here? We want to, like, this is going to help us create a structure for the webinar and know how many steps, know how many things you're going to be walking people through. And then webinar phase 3 is your webinar storyboard. So this has been game changing for me when I'm creating a webinar. This basically is my entire roadmap for the webinar. What I like to do is I like to open up a spreadsheet and create the following columns, and definitely download my webinar kit below because you'll get a copy of this too. So column number 1, I put the slide number. So in this one, I'm putting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not rocket science here, but basically I want to be able to, like, on slide 34, if I'm talking to a team member about it. Then column 2, I put the category or section of the slide. So maybe this is part of the intro section, or maybe it's part of the pitch section. Maybe it's talking point 1 or talking point 2. Then in column number 3, I put the text that is going to be on the webinar slide. So what is the text that's actually going to be on the slide? And if there's not going to be, maybe say this one's just a picture, I'll just put nothing there. Then column number 4, I put any notes around the design or the look of the slide. Column number 5, I put down my speaking notes so that I have not a full script to follow, but I have a pretty good idea of what those speaking notes, what those speaking points are going to be. And then finally, column number 6, I put any other note. So that's like my last column for just notes. So I can see the status of it there. So phase 3 is all about detailing the slides of your webinar. This is quite a beast, designing your slides, and I know that it really overwhelms a lot of people. So by creating this storyboard, we're going to take away a lot of the guesswork. We're going to create your plan before you ever open up PowerPoint or Keynote and start designing that presentation. So that leads us to webinar phase 4, which is designing your webinar slides. So step number 1 of this phase is just to design the template slides. So I like to come up with a few templates that I can, like, rinse and repeat and use for different slides, basically duplicate them. So I usually come up with a cover slide, a full text slide, a half text slide, a half image slide, and then a sub cover slide. So for your subsections or the main points that you are teaching in this webinar. So by creating those 5 different slide types and putting in some dummy language or some lorem ipsum, I'm able to just, like, duplicate that. I'm not needing to redesign each slide. I just duplicate it. I put in that specific info. And then what I will do is I like to just lay out the content. So I do it as rough as possible, or have my designer do it, right? Where it is like, it's not pretty at this point, but we're just putting it in there. We're putting the speaking notes, we're putting the text on the slides, we're putting in the image, and then do another pass through and clean it up. So I definitely separate out this, like, first draft of laying out the content, and then my second draft of going through with a fine-tooth comb and really, like, cleaning things up. So webinar phase 5 is your delivery. So this is a huge decision, and probably you have some idea of what it's going to be before you get to this phase. But we want to know whether you're going to be delivering your webinar live. Is there going to be a couple dates where you're doing it, or are you going to make it evergreen? So running it live means you have a specific day and time that you're going to be teaching it. So Wednesday at 5 p.m. versus evergreen, where people can watch the same webinar on their time. They can choose the time that they want to sign up for it. So this is an automated version, and people can either sign up and they get access right away, or you can go with a tool like EverWebinar where people select an actual date and time even though it's the same presentation. So if you are going to deliver it live, what I want you to do in this phase is choose the days and times that you're going to be hosting this webinar. So the best days and times, so from my experience, this is not science, but from my experience, like Tuesdays and Wednesdays tend to be the best best, like 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time or like 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tend to be the best times that I have had experience with hosting webinars. Then the second thing you're going to want to think about, like as part of this phase, is think about the tools you're going to use in order to host that webinar platform. So are you going to sign up for like Webinar Jam or EverWebinar? I have a link that'll get you a $1 60-day trial, so you can go and check that out if you want. It is an affiliate link, but you can at least it lets you test it out before you commit to it. So then the final step of this phase is to go and sign up with that tool. Go and sign up with that live webinar tool or the automated webinar tool, or, you know, just set it up with a low-tech version where they get access right away. So then webinar phase 6 is to come up with your sign-up system. So in this phase, we're going to be pulling together all of the opt-in components. So we want to have your opt-in page language, which luckily you can pull from that webinar briefing that we did earlier, your sign-up page. So that's the sign-up page. And then we want the thank you page. So the confirmation page, once they do sign up, where do they go? And then we also want that like welcome email or confirmation email. You might have a few reminder emails there as well to help them, to remind them to come to the webinar if it is on a specific day and time. So you kind of onboard them for it. So in this webinar phase 6, we're like writing and setting up the opt-in page, we're writing and setting up the thank you page, and we're writing and setting up those confirmation emails. So then phase number 7 is kind of like a cheater catch-all phase. So that is like all the what's next stuff. So what's next, we want to promote our webinar, and we want to also think about our follow-up sequence. So during the promotion phase of the webinar, we want to think about how you're going to get people to sign up for it. So what are you going to do to get the word out about your webinar? What promotional graphics are you going to create? What promotional text are you going to create? And where are you going to post it? The second thing is your follow-up sequence. So even though we are like selling on the webinar, so you're getting to your pitch section, a lot of your sales are going to be made after the webinar. So you want to make sure you have some strong follow-up emails in order to back up that webinar. So that follow-up that they get after they attend the webinar. So during this phase, you're going to be wanting to write those emails and get them scheduled in an email service provider so that they can go out. And it really depends on whether you're delivering it live. So you'll have specific days and times that they go out, or if it's automated. So it's going to be like 2 days after the webinar, 3 days after the webinar. So what I want you to do is I want you to download my webinar kit below this video, and let me know in the comments if you like this video, if you want more like this. And make sure to hit the next video on your screen, and subscribe for new videos like this every single Monday.